What stood out the most for you in the two worlds on how they intersect?
Two worldviews.
You can see it that way.
We're talking about worldviews in this episode, and I think it's important to probably describe my worldview before I lost the businesses. And to even describe and start what a worldview is. Essentially, to me, a worldview is how we see the world. Welcome to the Good Steward Podcast. Chris Evans here. And I want to share my journey from building a $70 million consulting business to losing it all. Together, we're going to explore the lessons of loss, burnout, and redefining success, finding true peace, joy, and contentment along the way. Welcome back to the Good Steward Podcast here with Chris Evans and Johnny Nel. We are glad to be back and good episode today. Today, I'm just gonna do a little bit differently on my end. I'm gonna risk it for the biscuit. You all right with that?
Chris mentioned he's really gonna let the spirit flow today.
He's just gonna go out on a limb. Hopefully, I don't embarrass myself.
You'll be okay, mate. What
are we talking about today? Since I'm going not off a script, I don't even know what we're talking about. Let's go for it.
Yeah, so in today's episode, it's going to be all about transformation. Specifically, how shifting your worldview can impact every area of your life, from business to relationships.
Yeah.
So, Chris, you are going to share your journey, and I think everyone listening will find themselves reflecting on their own perspective and see how they can apply everything that's being shared today in their own lives as well. So without further ado, Chris, can you describe your spiritual journey and how it has impacted your approach to business?
Yeah, we're talking about worldviews in this episode, and I think it's important to probably describe my worldview before I lost the businesses, and to even describe and start what a worldview is. Essentially, to me, a worldview is how we see the world, and that is created, formed, and shaped by mostly our environment coming up, right? The teachers, your parents, your family, your friends, your neighborhood, your school, just the thing that can potentially condition you, your church, your religion. And I love this definition of a worldview because from what I've known of a worldview before, there's so many different worldviews. You can be an atheist. You can be a believer. You could be a Christian. You could be a Muslim. Man, there's so many different ways that we can potentially see the world, right? Which is the worldview. To me, again, it's like the lens. But I love this view that I heard from Jamie Winship in describing there's really, truly two worldviews, and that's it. It's a really fascinating thing to consider. And it's not verbatim, but essentially it's this idea. You either have a scarcity worldview or you have an abundance worldview. The scarcity worldview is there's not enough. Everybody's trying to get something from me, take something from me. Or an abundant worldview is there is enough, there's plenty. And so when you really break that down, it's like, man, that makes so much sense. And so to come back to your question, I think that so much of the worldview that I looked at life was from a scarcity standpoint. There wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. I always had to get more, always had to become more, always had to get ahead of the competition. And so a lot of my spiritual journey in that light has been a shifting of my worldview of scarcity. I have lack. I live in lack to abundance. And of course, one thing that comes to mind for me is Psalm 23, which is really relevant to this, is the Lord is my shepherd. I have no lack, or I have no want, or I want for nothing. And I think that's really a good picture of the worldview that's being shaped now as an adult, a sovereign individual that has utility, understanding, knowledge, that I can go and start to form that new worldview. And so that's really been a big change for me, man, not to operate out of lack, or even, I'm going to go a little bit deeper if this is okay, Johnny. You okay if I go a little bit deeper here? Like you think about Jesus and, right, he said, man, love your enemies. When they hit you, turn the other cheek. And so to take that perspective and that worldview, like there was such an abundance that he had that no matter what the situation, he was always giving, not to his best friends or the disciples or the people that were close to him, Mary, Martha, Lazarus, but even his enemies, to love your neighbor as yourself. This is the second greatest commandment. Man, it's such a fascinating position. Like, you think about how we live in the world now and the polarization of politics and us against them and us against the Middle East. And I think that's such a scarcity worldview. And the more we can come into an abundance worldview, that I have enough, I am enough, and therefore I can love my neighbor as myself, whether they're the same faith or not, same background or not, same political values or not. That's the position that I want to be in. I think it's been a big part of my journey, and it's a fascinating place to be. Of course, I don't have it all figured out, but yeah, it's an interesting difference, especially growing up in the church and supposedly being under this place of these teachings, but yet so much of the church has it really wrong and operates completely from lack and scarcity.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. What does it mean to you to align your beliefs with the current worldview that you have?
Yeah, beliefs are an interesting thing I've been thinking a lot about, because I think this is where we have cognitive dissonance, which is misalignment, essentially. We have a belief in something or of something, and therefore our actions should be a result of those beliefs. But often we're not aware of the beliefs that we actually have. And when we have an action or do something in misalignment with that belief that we don't really know that we have, we find that we have an issue. And that's often where burnout comes from, because we're operating at tension with ourselves. I think I've been in a process of really being honest with what I believe. And I had to have a time really of some of my closest friends over the last couple of years telling them that I actually didn't believe God was good. That I actually didn't believe that he was going to take care of me, because my actions didn't align with what my said beliefs were. Yeah, of course I believe that God's good. Of course I believe God's going to take care of me. Of course, you could apply this to anything. This is just coming top of mind. Because if my feelings don't result or not representative of my beliefs, then it's going to manifest oftentimes in anxiety, or, right, especially in this example. If I were to truly believe that God was good, that he provides for me, that he takes care of me no matter what, and that I don't have any lack, then I think that you could state that I wouldn't struggle with anxiety and depression like I have, right? And feeling, man, I have such a concern for my future and what's going to happen. So I think it's really important that we get an awareness on what we actually believe. Our belief in our head and our belief in our heart. And again, this example, do I actually believe that God is good and that he'll take care of me? And be honest with that. And if it's something that I don't believe, because the action is I have anxiety, I operate out of striving, I operate out of self-reliance, then that's something I need to reform and I need to reshape and go back to the roots of that belief. And again, it comes back to our worldview and how we were formed and shaped. And thank God that we have a brain that is flexible and pliable and can be rewired according to the beliefs that we want to have.
Aligning beliefs with actions, it usually sounds quite simple, but it is huge when it comes to building trust and integrity. Do you feel like that's changed how others view your leadership when you're looking at aligning your beliefs with the actions and how that would affect you as a steward?
Yeah, I think so. Because here's the thing. I think when you allow yourself to get more in alignment with what you truly believe and you operate out of that place, it's being at a place where you don't allow yourself to compromise that integrity. And looking back into the businesses, I think I had a lot of compromise because I had this internal belief I wasn't truly aware of, and I acted a different way And so that's where the cognitive dissonance came in, where I didn't really want this thing, but I did this thing. I acted out this thing, whether it was a leadership or we launched a product that I just didn't meet the mark, whatever the situation was. And so now I'm coming to a place where I feel a lot more powerful in that I'm more in alignment to say no to certain things that I don't feel aligned with who I am, and therefore my actions follow suit, right? And that might be not pursuing money like I did before, but just being willing to be a lot more open-handed, and not trying to control things so much. It's a big conversation, right? Because my worldview was lack, and therefore I tried to control almost every aspect of my business, people, products, offers, and which is a hilarious thing because you can't really, at the end of the day, control that much, at least the outcomes, right? We can control what we do. And so, yeah, I think it's had a profound impact on how people see me, for sure, especially my family. And when we really discover our true worldview, like abundance, scarcity, what the side we stand on, the beliefs that are in alignment with that, and then our identity, our true identity. I don't know if I told you this, but I retook the Myers-Briggs assessment, and the results were totally different than when I took it when I was running my business, which was like a really fascinating thing. So even my personality has shifted and changed through this process that I've gone through. And I think because it's really uncovering who I really am and allowing that person to be fully authentic and expressed.
Thanks for sharing that.
Hey y'all, Chris here, just jumping in. I want to tell you about the Good Steward newsletter. If you're not on that, go to chrisaevans.com/newsletter, chrisaevans.com/newsletter, and get on that. It's a weekly newsletter. And I write a lot about my experience in business, growth, faith, family, really all the things that if you're listening to this, I think that you could find a lot of value in it. And it is written by me for you. Go check it out.
What advice would you give to everyone listening who's currently experiencing a bit of this cognitive dissonance, who could be questioning their current worldviews?
Yeah, I'd say that it's really normal. I'd say probably so many people operate out of that place. It's like our souls were made to operate from rest, to operate from security. And so much of society and the worldview that shapes us, again, is to say that's not what's possible. That's not who we are, right? Secure and safe. Again, the worldview of no lack, security, safety, abundance, all from the reference of God, right? Jesus. And so I think it's allowing ourselves to question our history and our past, even if you grew up in the church, especially maybe if you grew up in the church, to question those things and get down to the roots and to allow yourself to source those thoughts and beliefs that you have. Because of course, like when you grow up, again, if you grow up in the church in a situation like that, where you can't say that you don't believe in God, right? Or you don't believe an attribute of God or a characteristic of God that he cares and protects, because you would be ostracized, that's very likely. And like we've talked about this, you might be expelled from the tribe, so to speak. And that's very dangerous, or a sense of danger. So oftentimes what happens instead is we become disenfranchised with something that could be really healthy and good, right? And we start to often become very bitter of those beliefs. And so I think finding a safe environment that you can talk these things through and really to reestablish, what do I believe and what do I want to believe? And to find that truth and ask truth, which I think I would say is Jesus, to speak to you. And I've heard crazy stories of people who don't know Jesus and asking him to show them something, and he does, maybe bringing a thought to mind. So maybe you're listening to this and you feel disenfranchised from the church or Jesus or God, and maybe you wouldn't identify that's something that you believe in. I would just encourage you, ask, show me truth. And the thought that comes feels like peace, I believe that's God speaking to you. Of course, this is unscripted. We weren't planning to go this direction, but it just has come up. And I think it's important because I do believe that we were made for love, to love. And it's very easy to be distracted from that by all the whims and craziness in the world, right? And again, even in the church, whatever your experience was. And so invitation today is maybe just ask God, if you're real, if you're true, if you care, would you show yourself to me? And so what might happen is you might just get a thought, a memory of your childhood that'll come up where something special happens, or maybe a random conversation happens this week that you didn't plan, and just God is going to show up in your life and he's going to reveal himself, because that's what he does.
Yeah, man. Said. A big thing as well would be thinking of questioning your own worldview.
Yeah.
It can definitely feel scary,
Yeah.
but that's where the transformation begins.
Yeah.
It really is.
Such a good point. There's so many things about church that I've questioned. I was a guy that grew up in the church. I was in a charismatic church, and I was a missionary in Europe for several years. And there's so much about that now that I'm looking back on. I'm like, whoa, dude. Yeah, I'm not really like feeling that so much anymore, because it comes down to the heart. There's so many different sects and views of even religion or even Christianity. And again, so many of those I think are from a place, or have come from a place of the worldview of lack, where it's me against this person, right? My view against this person's view. It just comes down to what's the intention of Jesus? And that is unity. That's health. That's love. That's sacrifice. That's kindness. That's purity. That's grace. Long suffering, right? That's what I want to align with. So I think it's a really good thing and healthy thing to consider those aspects of our upbringing and to allow ourselves that process to go through.
For everyone listening, there might be a few people who's interested in examining their current worldview. What questions should they be asking themselves?
Yeah. I think maybe some of the most important ones. Do I believe there is a God who loves me? That's a very cornerstone question, right? If you look out, man, I went out the other night to let the dogs out. Everybody was asleep. It's 10 or 11 this weekend. And the sky was absolutely clear, like no clouds, almost a full moon. And you could just see the radiance of the stars. And I was just standing there, just staring up like, how is this possible? This did not just happen. Creation must have a creator. And I think that is the place you start. Like, you look at the human being, dude, the human design, and the ability for humans to create and design. And you look at all the different animals, and it's so mind-boggling to consider. I truly believe that there is a God that created all this, and that God is a loving God. Of course, I don't understand all aspects of it. It's incomprehensible. And so I'd start with that. Is there a God, a creator who loves me and created me? And if you don't believe that, then that's a different conversation, right? And even if you don't, I'd even say, if there is a God who loves me and cares for me, will you show yourself to me? And he will. He will. And also, I think there's such a lightness and a peace and a rest that comes from that place. And I've studied religion. I've been all over the world. I've had crazy experiences, very crazy spiritual experiences. Maybe I'll talk about one day in your continent as well, Johnny, in Africa, and in Europe, and in Asia. And man, you can't convince me that there's not a God and there's not a spiritual realm.
What did you say could be one question that you think people tend to overlook when examining their worldview?
The first thing that comes to mind is, do I operate out of abundance or scarcity? Do I operate out of peace or fear? Because all the promises from a biblical standpoint, yeah, we'll have challenges. We'll deal with fear because we're humans and human nature in this life. But the promise is peace and joy that surpasses all understanding, that transcends all of my situations. And if you operate more out of fear or scarcity, or you feel like there's not enough or there won't be enough, I think that's a good place to start. Because again, your head knowledge belief, like how you're raised, is that maybe you do believe in God, or there is a God, or you might identify even as a Christian or whatever. But your actions, your feelings are a different thing. If you live in anxiety or angst or fear, or you deal with depression as a common theme in your life, all those negative, if those are stable in your life, then I think it's a good indicator to really question your beliefs, right? Because our thinking and our beliefs dictate our feelings. So if my feelings are constantly like, man, I'm always worried. It could be about money. It could be about safety. It could be about the economy. It could be about your kids. It could be about Trump or Kamala, like whatever. It could be about Russia and China. That could be a good indication that you don't actually believe that there is a God who cares and that gives peace right now. And that's available. And that's, it's a promise. It's something I've thought a lot about is Isaiah 26:3. You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind, whose imagination is fixed on you. Right? Which is such a profound verse to consider. And I think that's where I would start. Do I operate and live out of rest, abundance, joy, and peace? Or fear, scarcity? And if you do, it's a great opportunity. No shame, no guilt. It's a great opportunity to say, what do I actually believe? And man, I wish someone had this conversation with me or asked these questions or I heard this, because I was going after the things that you're supposed to get, right? The money and the accolades and the business and the success. Yet I dealt a lot with anxiety and worry, even with all that stuff, even with a lot of money coming in, still felt insecure. And I've had greater levels of security with way less. And big trials, dude, like lawsuits and FTC and this and that. Not that I don't deal with fear, not that I don't deal with scarcity, but the overarching trend is peace and joy and contentment. And because it's required me going through this process to really question my beliefs and like, okay, I actually don't believe the things that I say I do. If I did, I think the results would be a lot different.
Thanks for sharing, Chris.
Yeah.
As we wrap up today's session, what verse, other than Isaiah and Psalms 23, would you say that highlights worldview?
Romans 12:2. This has been a theme for me, and it's do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And really, it's a daily basis. Again, this all goes back to how you think, and your beliefs start in your thinking. And if you feel like you're not operating out of peace and joy and contentment and rest, it starts with renewal of your mind. And that's getting a new worldview of abundance, peace, joy, all the things that are promised to us from a biblical standpoint, and starting to rework and rewire those thought patterns and those belief systems. And that takes work. It's a daily working out, right? And I'm sure you have a lot to say on this too, but there's a really good book. I think I mentioned this before, Feeling Good by Dr. David Burns. Just, it gives you some really good processes for being able to capture your thoughts and your distortions, your cognitive, your thinking distortions. And so I actually started this process where I have a little notebook where I go, and if I have a really bad feeling or negative feelings, anxiety, angst, or whatever, I work to go and trace that thought and that belief system. And then I'm writing that down so that I can confront it and say, okay, what needs to be reworked here? And that's part of the renewal of the mind that I would encourage everybody here to check out and try. And Patterns take a while to establish. And so all the beliefs, worldview, negative patterns, unhealthy patterns that you have, they've taken years to establish. So getting awareness on them, you can start to rework those and renew those things and live from a more abundant place if you have tons of money or not. I think about Paul, the apostle. Dude was in prison, persecuted, beaten, shipwrecked. And he was talking about having a peace that surpassed all that persecution in such an abundance, really not having much. This guy was an entrepreneur. He was a brilliant guy. He was a scholar, probably had the whole Old Testament memorized. Just a brilliant dude. And yet didn't really have much to show from an external standpoint, but his sacrifice and service to the early church, and lived from such a place of transcendent peace. That's what I want, man, because what is absolutely true, I wrote about this in the newsletter, chrisaevans.com/newsletter, little plug there, the Good Steward newsletter, was one thing that is certain is that we will have uncertainty. We just don't know what's around the corner. And any storm or any challenge that you're going through is really always a great opportunity to reevaluate what we believe and how we see the world. And man, I want to believe in a God who is alive, who cares, who's involved, who's intentional, who has good things for me. No matter what happens, right? Like bad things are going to happen. That's just the way of this life. And so even in that, to have a God that's alive that I can connect with, that's where I'm going these days, man.
Yeah, it's a good path to be on. Thank you for your openness. To everyone listening, remember, transforming your worldview starts with small, intentional steps.
Yeah.
So keep on asking the right, important questions and trust the process. That's all from my side today. Chris, is there anything else from your side before we
go and rate the podcast, share it with someone who needs it, and send us an email if this resonates with you, support@chrisaevans.com. I'd love to hear from you, and much love. Until next time.